Good afternoon and welcome to MZ webinars. Today we're going to be discussing the Higher and Degree Apprenticeships and basically how maximising your impact and identifying new opportunities can help you. So we've got Andy Derman, who is the Managing Director of MC with us today, who's presenting this webinar. So I'd like to just hand over to him and welcome Andy.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Good afternoon and happy National Apprenticeship Week. So yes, today want to just take a moment to quickly whiz through some thoughts that we're developing around the emerging higher and degree apprenticeship agenda, and wanted to share those with you. So in terms of today's session, I'll just quick intro to MZ for those of you who are new to us. I then want to share some insight that I've certainly been gaining on the topic as I've connected in with universities over the last month or so, and wanted to share some thoughts we've been doing in terms of collapsing that thinking into three-stage process that we think could be helpful in terms of maximizing opportunities and ultimately achieving success in this arena, and ultimately thinking about why this is important. So without further ado, I'm going to just quickly introduce the work we do and why we do what we do here at MZ. So our mission is very much about helping people to make better decisions when it relates to the world of work, education, skills, careers. And we do this by providing good localized labour market insight, which we think is really important to helping make those better decisions. We're working with a whole range of organisations, further in higher education, around about 100 or so colleges and universities. That's very much about feeding into strategic direction and planning, as well as engagement and thinking in terms of the relationship between education and current and future employment trends. We're working with economic development organisations, so local enterprise partnerships, local authorities, very much an extension of that skills agenda, particularly as devolution kicks in and localization develops yet further, but actually also thinking about the availability of talent and how valuable that is and how attractive that can be in two regions as they look to reach out and nurture and grow business within their regions. And our other group that we work with is largely those organizations that support the employment agenda, which very much is about accessing and understanding how and where to access current and future talent. We believe good information has a key role to play in supporting all of those agendas. And by supporting all of those agendas, it'll really make a big difference to how our economy works as we develop and grow. In terms of our work in the university space, more specifically, of course, a lot of challenges and opportunities facing the sector, and very much putting employability, employment outcomes at the heart of a lot of thinking, with the current reviews of higher education in more general senses, but the range of activities and agendas affecting the sector. We're already working with a good number of friends in the sector. You can see some of them listed there, who are very much at the forefront of the thinking in this arena. Of course, one of those big items, challenges, opportunities, of course, is the apprenticeship agenda, which very much does put employer demand at the heart of the system. And this clearly presents some fantastic opportunities as well as plenty of challenges for the sector. As I mentioned earlier, I've, in the last month or so, been reaching out to a number of universities and connecting in with universities on this topic to get a sense of where we're at and how people are viewing this. And some of you on the podcast, on the webinar today, I will have spoken to, and I'm very grateful for your input. So today's session, I suppose, in some senses, pulls some of those strands together, and as I say, is about trying to think about, so what can we do about this then? So just to set the scene, probably nothing particularly new or alarming here, but some of the key themes that are falling out of that wider apprenticeship discussion. Obviously, the levy and employer demand being at the heart of a lot of thinking there, and policy has very much been driving the agenda, the government and their much fabled 3 million apprenticeship target within the Parliament, which is a big strategic driver and ambition for the government. Of course, there are other drivers, the opportunities. So as standards, particularly at the higher degree and postgraduate levels, are starting to emerge, presents great opportunities. And of course, it's an opportunity around driving income, whether that's about diversifying for a university, growing, or in many cases, preserving income as the levy changes how people might engage with your provision. And for a lot of people as well, I'm very excited to hear the social mobility dimension, the fact that apprenticeships are very much seen as an opportunity to really fulfill ambitions and obligations, some may say, around widening participation. So lots of key drivers affecting it, and you'll probably have your own set as well for your own organizations. But these drivers present some challenges. Top of the list, I know it's very common concern, is there is a ton of bureaucracy, rules, regulations that is pretty limiting, and to those relatively new to this space, really eye-opening. My background, I used to work at the Learning and Skills Council, so I'm very familiar with the delights that ILR data returns, etc., will bring. But a fundamental challenge, of course, is that we're very much putting employers at the heart of this system, which for some is an extension of what we already do anyway. But for a lot of people, this is quite a different way of thinking, a new way of thinking, and so presents institutionally some interesting challenges. But the upsides are great. If we can really figure this thing out, we've got an opportunity to make a big difference, both institutionally within our institution, but also really at the heart of our communities and our economic communities. And for those of you who have had the dubious privilege to have read some such key documents as the industrial strategy, you'll see there's a big role emerging for universities to continue to build and grow their value to regional economies, and a critical driver to growing productivity. Apprenticeships are very much seen at the heart of that, for sure. So I mentioned that our mission here at MZ is about building out and helping a knowledge of the labour market and help people make better decisions. Well, here is a perfect example in the role that labour market information can play. At the end of the day, if we're putting employers at the heart of the system, we need to have a way of really understanding what that employment landscape looks like and to fill some gaps quickly. I always say there is no substitution for talking with employers directly, but there are a lot of employers out there, some of whom are very willing to talk and others perhaps not so involved. And so data like ours is particularly useful in helping to fill some of those gaps, test some assumptions, and shape some thinking. And that'll be at the heart of what we talk about today. How does that fit in? Well, this is about building that robust evidence base to help us prioritize and focus. There's lots of opportunity out there specific to the higher and degree apprenticeship agenda, but well beyond that too. So how do we make sure we're focusing in the right places? How do we bring our colleagues with us? I know that's a big challenge in general. And how do we build a sound evidence base that will help build internal consensus? How do we use this information not just from a planning and a testing perspective, but how do we ultimately then use that same intelligence to shape our engagement activities, whether that's at the employer end or the student end? And ultimately, it's all about helping you plan for success and deliver great value to your communities and to your stakeholders. So let's dig into this a little more. And as I say, we've worked on trying to boil this down to think of three key stages we think universities might want to consider as they're building out their thinking on this subject area. So I'll take you through those three stages now. So step one, certainly what I picked up very quickly is most universities now have at least one standard in place, for some quite a number. And often that's driven from existing work, existing activities, or some good, strong early employer relationships. The levy has particularly driven that agenda, and I know a number of universities have been approached by large local employers to help meet potential need there. And so a great place to start, well, better place, true employer engagement, to true employer demand. But a question I would pose, and I know many people are asking internally, is yeah, we can connect with a particular employer, but are we really maximizing our potential? Do we even know what that potential is? And so in stage one, we very much think that that's about building out from what we have already. And this is where we feel labour market information can help you by connecting your current standards into the local and regional labour market trends. This will allow you to quantify that demand and really articulate it beyond the specifics of the early engagement, and then start to pose quite interesting questions about, right, well, not only what size of demand there is in terms of the employment landscape, but who holds that demand? Where does this employment lie? What are employers needing in the wider world in terms of skills and potential course content to make sure that we are meeting as broad a need as possible, that might go slightly beyond the specific needs of your early customers, and then ultimately to start to think about how we take this out into the marketplace. So let me work through a little example here. So I've just picked completely at random the Digital and Technology Solutions Professional Degree Apprenticeship. I know this is something that a lot of people are either running currently or looking to run. Makes a ton of sense, has a good feel about it in terms of the way our economy is going. But let's start to quantify that. First things first, we need to work out, well, what sorts of jobs does this align to? So how do we define the market? And I've used the standard occupational classification, SOC codes, to define 3 key occupations that fit into that standard. So we're looking at business analysts, IT business analysts, programmers, of course, and then web design and development professionals. So once we have those parameters, we can then start to link that into the data to start to think about volumes and opportunity. So again, completely at random, I picked out the fair city of Birmingham. And when you start to look at those 3 occupations, we can see, well, there's almost 5,000 people employed in those jobs. And it's projected to grow. Probably not a big shock there, but we can start to quantify that. And actually that translates into probably almost about 1,000 job opportunities in that 5-year period when you take into account not just that growth, but also replacement demand within the economy. So we can now start to quantify what that potential might look like. From there, we can then start to think about what types of companies employ these roles. And again, we've looked specifically at Birmingham here. And so you can see on the vast majority are employed within the tech sector. Probably not a big shock there, but actually it's a fairly general occupation set that's in demand right across the economy. And we can see financial services coming through, the public sector, tertiary education. So quite a mix there, and that will vary region to region depending on the industry mix we see on offer. So now we got a sense of what sorts of companies might be interested in working with us, so we can help them with that growing employment need. We might want to start to then dig that bit deeper and start to look to, well, what skills are people asking for? And here we've dipped into some work we're doing around aggregating job postings, so online job postings, and starting to look at what common skill requirements are coming out here. So we can see that list, Java, SQL, C#. So this might help start to shape out some of the thinking about what type of specific content we build into our provision and into our offer, and what's going to be engaging to employers in our region. So we can really start to feed that thinking in. We have a degree of flexibility. Let's use this kind of statistical information to shape that. And finally, in terms of that kind of maximizing the current offer, who is it that has these needs? So I've just looked at a month's worth of recent job postings, and you can start to see, obviously we get staffing companies who advertise readily, and so that sometimes skews this, but you can start to pick out some pretty interesting employers there: Jaguar Land Rover, Atkins, Capgemini, and obviously you can look over a larger period of time to build your sample. Interesting side point, we've got an indicator here which is posting duration. So that's how long on average these job postings are live and open. And it's interesting to see that Atkins on average is around about 18 days compared to Jaguar Land Rover 12 days. So that might indicate that Atkins find a little bit harder perhaps to hire and need to keep these job postings open a little further. So they may be struggling to hire a bit more, and could be worth a chat with. So this first stage is really about building from what you've already got. How do we maximize that? How do you really lay down a strong basis? Stage 2 is then about us building on that yet further and starting to think, right, well, we have an infrastructure in place. We've gone through the headaches of data returns and built the infrastructure. Let's really start to lift off. And of course, again, speaking to lots of you and your colleagues in the sector, there's already a backlog, a list of potential standards that are being discussed and considered. So the next question I want to pose, and again, I know people are asking themselves, is right, well, we have this emerging list, but hey, how should we prioritize them? We can't bring them all to market immediately. How do we prioritize where we focus? And actually, as much as we might think they're good potential, are they? Is there demand? So this is where we move on to that stage 2. And again, once again, it's about connecting into the local labor market to build an understanding of local demand. But this time it's about comparison. So how do we take the next tranche and start to think through, hey, what does the market look like? And if we can't bring them all through, if it's not efficient or effective for us to bring them all through, how do we prioritize amongst that group? And how do we maybe look to where we have an established offer to exploit some quick wins? So once again, working through an example, still in Birmingham here, and I've just picked out a largely random set of level 6 and above standards that are currently available. And this could be your short list of people who are bringing ideas to you or keen to get involved. And so the big question is, well, how do we prioritize? So much like we did for the individual standard previously in the previous example, we can now map in the labor market, the local labor market, to help understand that. And of course, one area might be to prioritize those that have a larger labor market component to them, to indicate that there might be greater potential demand here. And as I say, I mean, always looking for efficiencies. Well, these top 3 very much financial services based roles. And if you recall from our original example, the financial services sector also could be pretty good for our digital and technology solutions apprenticeship. So there could be some opportunities to exploit some quick wins by combining a range of offer that we know our existing customers might be interested in as well. So again, we can start to triangulate different viewpoints there. Okay, moving on to the third stage then. So stages 1 and 2 were very much about, well, supply driven, about, hey, what do we offer currently, or what are we thinking about offering, and how do we prioritize? Our view is that, once this is really motoring, hey, let's really throw this out to the market, and let's actually start from the demand side as opposed to the supply side and map back that way. This way we'll be able to start to pose even broader perhaps more challenging questions, but the upsides are potentially even greater here. So so we have our baseline, we have our infrastructure in place, we have a growing list of standards, hopefully, in terms of services you can offer. And we're obviously sat waiting on our hands for the IFA to bring some more of those through. But where there is great choice, there comes a need to prioritize again. And so this is where, once again, we can look to labour market insight as a supporting factor here. But it's about mapping it across to all standards. What are the all potential opportunities, and how do we map back to work out which ones have the best opportunities for us and our organisation? So first things first, we can start to quantify demand. We can once again compare across a range of standards and help our thinking around prioritisation, but then start to think about connections back to the existing portfolio at the university to really help shape where your opportunities lie. So to work through this further example, here are all current level 6+ standards, ranked by numbers of jobs, again in Birmingham. The first two, the chartered manager and the teacher, very much off the scale, so I've curtailed those, but you can see the numbers in the bars themselves just to give us some variation in the rest of the graph there. But what we can see is there is quite a range in terms of the relationship between the apprenticeship standards at level 6 and above and the size of the workforce in our region. I've hypothetically then highlighted in the darker colour perhaps provision that isn't already offered at my university. So we can see where in the lighter green, where it might map to existing strengths and resources within the university, and those areas, those darker areas, where it might be about whole new provision or partnership development. Now, each has their pros and cons. Of course, if you can connect back into your existing provision where you have an infrastructure to build from, it could be a great opportunity to exploit some quick wins, diversify how people engage with the university. But there is a risk of potential cannibalization of an existing way of working and a solid infrastructure and income stream there. So that's something worth bearing in mind. Of course, on the flip side, those darker bars could be a great way for us to diversify, but we could be building from a position of weakness in the sense that these aren't areas we're already offering. And so that brings a suite of risks with it, but it is a great way of perhaps starting to develop our portfolio. So lots of opportunities. I'm not saying we have all the answers, but I certainly feel that you start to connect into employment trends and you can start to contextualize and round out that thinking. So those are the 3 steps. Step 1, build off what you're already doing. Step 2, test your short-term plans. And ultimately, step 3, work towards being more market-led and letting demand, market demand and employment trends really drive that thinking. So just to kind of round this out then, why is this important? Well, ultimately, we want to help you avoid the hazard. That's quite a big hazard, that one. And we want to help you really build out strong understanding of the market, to really build off those early relationships, which will be really valuable in terms of getting things going, but to help you kind of assess around this whether these are the best platforms for growth. So great short-term opportunities, but what's the wider potential? And might there be better opportunities out there to focus on, but just haven't come your way yet? Well, hopefully we can illuminate, or certainly the use of data can help you illuminate that thinking. And of course, it's a very noisy and busy space with a lot of eyes on it right now. And so the big challenge here, of course, is that if you don't jump on it, sure as hell someone else will. And we're obviously keen to help you maximize your opportunities and play to your strengths in that respect. So good information, good data, alongside other insight about the other provision and competitor analysis will really help to build out a solid understanding. It should really help you avoid those hazards, and we can then focus a lot more on the success side, the more interesting side. So in helping you gain a better understanding of employer demand, this will help you focus and prioritize your activities, really target and shape engagement activities. This is all about helping you to maximize your opportunities and critically play that key role in driving growth, economic growth regionally, and ultimately change lives for the better. So I hope that's been a useful kind of summary. As I say, I've been really grateful for the time that people have provided in sharing their views and thoughts, and it's been interesting in terms of pulling some of these early thoughts together. If you're interested in finding out more, well, I'd certainly love to talk to you. Everyone is at a different stage. There are a whole host of different challenges and opportunities, which I've tried to summarize here, but I'd love to learn more about your specific needs, and I'd love for you to challenge me to come up with ideas and thoughts and examples of where integrating more of this kind of information can be super helpful. So I'd love to get together, and ultimately we'd love to work with you. We'd love to be alongside you to help with this, and we are already helping a number of universities, and keen to share the expertise and the experience we're building from that and start to connect you into that thinking. We also have a range of resources that are in production right now. So the 3 stages I took you through just a moment ago is a basic summary, and we have a guide that kind of sort of how-to guide that'll build that out a little more. That should be available shortly, and everyone on this webinar will get a copy of that as a thank you for joining us today. I'd love to share some more locally relevant information, and so feel free to reach out if you'd like me to provide a little bit more of a local summary report, perhaps for a particular standard you're working on or thinking about. Just let me know, just drop me a note, and I'll happily pull some thoughts together there. This is the first in what we hope to be a number of webinars on this series, and I'm actually currently working on a few case studies that I'd love to bring to bear and start to share some good practice from within the sector. We've penciled in a slot on the 25th of April. We will confirm that, and we will communicate that with you, but do keep an eye out for that one. And I'd also like to invite you to consider and take a look at our upcoming conference on the 15th of May in Birmingham. We have some fantastic speakers. We've just announced our keynote speakers there. Do check out the conference website. Good friend of ours, Gresham Gill, who is on this webinar, is going to be sharing his experience, particularly around utilizing insight to shape the thinking at Birmingham City University. So that's definitely one to keep an eye out for. But ultimately, this is one broader jigsaw that is all about driving prosperity and growth for individuals at the regional level. And so the conference will certainly unpick different dimensions of that and how they connect together to achieve success. So that's going to be a great conference, and you should check that out. And I just want to close off from me just to say thank you very much for joining me for the last half an hour. Hope you found that useful. As I say, we'd love to hear from you. There are my details. We will be sending a recording of this webinar out, and as I say, we will follow up with a copy of that 3-stage guide. I'd welcome your feedback and thoughts in terms of how that applies to you guys and what you might be interested to understand a little more in a little more detail to shape out future webinar content. So thank you very much, and I very much hope to hear from you before too long.
That's great. Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you for that great presentation. if anyone has any questions, we haven't got any at the moment, but if you'd like to put the questions in the box at the bottom of your control panel before you leave, then we can get back and answer your questions. So thank you so much, and we look forward to you joining us at our next webinar. So goodbye, thank you.